Hi, my name is Shola Kaye. I'm a public speaking coach and a professional speaker based in London, and my company is called Speak Up Like a Diva, and sometimes I call it Speak Up and Shine. And what I want to talk about today is how do you deal with a hostile audience, or at least with unfriendly faces in the audience. Yesterday, I was speaking with a lady who had come to me for some coaching advice. And she said to me, well, I spoke once before and there was somebody in the audience that seemed to be giving me a really dirty, hostile look. And every time I looked at that person, I got so thrown off my train of thought that I found it really quite disturbing. And now I don't necessarily want to do any more speaking, but I know I have to. And anyone who's done a fair bit of speaking has probably encountered that at some point before. They look out at the audience and they catch sight of somebody who, maybe they're looking a bit grumpy or arms folded, or their face is impassive, or perhaps they look like they're falling asleep even, right? So they might encounter a couple of individuals, or another one is there's somebody I know that who puts people off when they're speaking because he sits with his arms folded and he raises his eyebrows like, I'm not sure if I can raise my eyebrows, too much Botox, no, but he'll raise his eyebrows as though what the person's saying is completely unbelievable and a load of rubbish. And so whenever they look at him, again, they're put off, off their stride by his expression. And so how do we deal with that when we have people in the audience who look that way? And I remember, some of you know that I also do some professional singing. And a few years ago, I remember when I was sort of starting out singing and I was doing a solo gig, and I went to this gig and right in the front row while I was singing, a family of 4 people came along, two adults and 2 sort of late teenagers, I'd say, came along, sat in 4 consecutive seats in the front row, folded their arms, looked completely miserable and like they didn't want to be there. And the whole time I'm performing, there's this row of people, stony faced. And it's incredibly off-putting. And I remember I did the wrong thing because I was focusing on them. I was thinking, what can I do to make these people cheer up? And I was like, I was singing and dancing anyway. But I was like, and it didn't make a difference. And eventually they walked out as stony-faced, poker-faced as they had, walked in. And in the meantime, I'd sort of neglected the sort of audience that were having a good time, laughing, drinking, joking, etc., because I was so worried about these people. So in the same way, I would give you the same advice that I should have sort of listened to back then, which is when you see those odd faces in the audience who look like they're, not happy, miserable, tired, bored, whatever it might be. Okay, clock them, but your responsibility is to the audience as a whole. It's not to these, handful of individuals who look like they're not having a good time or they disagree with what you're saying. And some people, that's just their face, right? I mean, in my book, I talk about the fact that you may have people in your audience with what I call resting bitch face, right? They just look a bit solemn or a bit grumpy or angry. You don't know them. So how do you know what their resting expression is? And it's not for you, it's not the time for you to sort of take away or move away from being present to your entire audience to worry about these 1 or 2 people. In addition to that, some people, I've had situations where there've been people who've looked really grumpy and miserable, and then at the end, they've been the people who are first in the line to talk to me and say, oh, I really enjoyed that. And I remember speaking at one particular event. It was an event for the civil service, and there were about 30, 40 people in the room. And there was one woman who was really frowning and looked very unhappy. And at the end, she was one of the first people in the queue to have a chat. And I did actually say to her, well, I looked at you a few times and I was worried because you looked really unhappy or like you didn't agree with me. And she said, no, I was just listening really carefully to what you had to say. And that was a real lesson for me. Having that conversation with that woman made me realise that it's not for me to try and interpret the expression of certain individuals in the room. Now, if it's an interactive experience, you can even ask, if there's a period where there's a bit of Q&A, or you chatting to people in the room and asking them for their feedback through the talk, you can even say to them, the lady over there, you look a little bit like you don't agree. What's your opinion on this? You can, ask people, call them out, see what they've got to say at that time. Another situation, it was a singing situation actually, where there was a guy who was sort of looking really bored and like he wanted to fall asleep. And that's probably more acceptable at a speaking gig than at a singing gig, where someone's, there's loud music and entertainment. But I said to him, I think I may even have said to him during the middle of the gig, I just said, hey, you over there, you look like you're falling asleep, are you okay? And he said, I've just come off a really long shift at work, but I'm enjoying it, but I'm just feeling so tired. Boom, get on with the show, right? So it's not always your fault when people look a bit miserable or a bit grumpy. Don't let them sort of divert you from your path, from what you were going to say, and from being happy to be up there and having to be in this speaking opportunity. Now, one situation that is a little different than that is when you have an entire audience, or 80-90% of people in the room, or 50% or whatever, when they look like, what's going on, they're unhappy or shifting, rustling, etc. Because it could be that there's a major miscommunication going on. It could be that you thought you were brought in to talk on topic A, whereas the audience is expecting topic B, but no one is bold enough to call out and say, well, hold on, this sounds like the wrong topic. It could be that, you are completely sending people to sleep, or your view is so different than theirs that you are ruffling their feathers and making them feel quite hostile towards you. So if you encounter a big, like a big response to you that is not favourable, or people, a lot of people looking like, if you don't know the reason for it, then stop and ask. Break that sort of barrier, that fourth wall between you, and actually reach out and say, look guys, is there a problem? And you might hear something that will help you to, take a different course for the rest of your presentation. Or it might be, sometimes you're called in to deliver bad news. So of course, if that's the case, hopefully whoever briefed you told you that what you're saying to the audience is something that they may not agree with or may not want to hear. For example, if you work in corporate and you're a consultant, you're coming in and you're telling people about restructuring that will, essentially change their jobs, change their income, mean that they're out of a job. Of course, you've got to expect a bit of pushback and some sort of hostile responses to your message. But, going back to my original point, which is if you see one or two faces, you've got to make a call. If it's one or two, if you're in a sort of chit-chatty situation, maybe you can call somebody out. Hey, you look a bit miserable. What's going on? But if it's just like a smattering in a large audience, and most people look like they're having a good time, they're there getting the value that they wanted to get from you, and it's just a handful of people who look like they're not too happy, then your job is to serve the multitude. Make sure everybody, the majority, is happy with what you're doing. Carry on. Don't be thrown off your path by one or two people who just may have a bit of a miserable day-to-day expression on their face, right? So I hope that helps. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to deal with audiences, you may want to pick up my book, which is called How to Be a Diva at Public Speaking. And in this book, there is a section on dealing with tricky audiences. I think it's towards the end. And it's also in my two online courses, my group program and my, what's the other one? And the one on, what's it called? Got such a memorable name. I've forgotten it. 6 weeks to speaking success. Anyway, that's it from me. I think I'm losing my marbles. I need to go and lie down and get my brain cells back into shape. And I will see you next time. Take care.